All right, so we're going to look at Cleve Chapter 7, which is casting crew from a production manager's perspective. So, when hiring, the production manager or line producer generally hires. Always, always, always hire the department heads first so that you can use input from the department heads for hiring the crew. But then the production manager actually makes the job offers and negotiates rates if there's not a line producer. Do contact references. Don't assume everything is legit on people's resumes and reels, guys. Um, in addition to personal professional qualifications, personality matters. Film life is long and stressful. If people don't get along, or if somebody's like getting a job when they really wanted a different job, is the first AD there because they want to be the first AD, or because they really want to direct and try to push the director out? Like, those are concerns that can make for a very stressful shoot. So don't discount your instincts if there are some personality concerns. Likewise, drugs, alcohol, smoking, these are all concerns, right? A lot of sets, of course, they all have no drugs or alcohol on set, and smoking not on set. But, sometimes if there's a lot of interiors, it may be necessary to have just a rule against we can't hire smokers because there are issues with allergies and smells. Like, these are concerns to think about a little bit more than you would in some other positions. So, during the pre-production phase, something that you guys on the other end of this, when you're not hiring but being hired, might find frustrating is you want your deal memo. You want your deal memo. You want to sign something that commits that this is happening. The production manager is playing a game, trying to get deal memos all signed early enough to not cause delays, but as late as possible to avoid having to pay people if the production falls through. You don't want people doing work before everything is finalized, and you don't want to have contractual obligations to pay them. And of course, some departments start sooner than others. So, like a production designer might be one of the first people hired, or an art department for constructing sets. The first AD is usually hired near the end of pre production. So, the production manager is doing a lot of this stuff. Then the AD comes in to really work through the details of the schedule. There's a great list in the book on page 104 to 106 for a larger list for a typical indie film, and good descriptions of the roles are in the book. And this is in one of those chapters I scanned for you guys. If you haven't already, make sure you read it. I want to go over really the most stripped down crews with you guys. So this is what I would call the smallest reasonable indie crew list. This is not the me and my friend that went out with a handy cam and shot something. So you have a producer who functions as the line producer as well, and often publicity. Director, who's in charge of actors in the shot list. If the producer and the director are the same person, it's really difficult to pull this off if you don't also have a line producer or a production manager. Because if the director is dealing with contracts while on set, there's a problem. You want a producer to be able to handle that, or line producer, production manager. A first assistant director, they usually also slate. So they prep the take and then they slate it, because you don't often get a second AC. Production designer, hair, makeup, and wardrobe often get combined. It's really important to still have hair and makeup and wardrobe, though, guys. Um, Actors need to look good. They're your talent. So it's important to have those so that you're not relying on actors to do it themselves. Some of them are bad at it, and it's also just a stress. They need to be thinking about their lines and their character, not how they look. Often the locations manager gets combined with who does crafting and meals, because they don't have too much to do once the shoot is going, but crafting and meals have to be taken care of. Director of photography is usually the cam op on these small shoots, and then they have a first AC. Then a gaffer who double duties as a key grip, sound mixer who boom ops. Now, one of the most important positions, if you can swing it, is to have a separate boom op, because it is very difficult to sound mix and boom op. If you have a combined person, which frequently happens, you're really committing to not getting a sound mix. It means you're getting sound recording on set, and the mix has to be totally in post. And it does. It happens a lot. But you're not getting a working sound mix out of that person. They're essentially a boom op who is also miking people up and hitting record. They're not able to mix and boom op at the same time. it is not possible, guys. So that's your really, in my opinion and in my experience, the smallest reasonable indie crew list. So that's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people minimum for a reasonable crew size. Now, if you're on an ENG, an electronic news gathering, or like a testimonial shoot or a reality TV, you often have a field producer who is functioning also as the director, because you're not directing talent, you are directing shots and asking interview questions, right? They often are the person who also slates and does production design and gets releases filled if it isn't done in advance. You might have 1 to 4 cam ops. This is for like a small reality TV crew, obviously, not the big ones that have the same kind of size as crews and additional subunits as a feature film, but the little reality TV crews that are very much like ENG crews. So those cam ops, you have 1 per camera, and they also usually do any and all lighting, and they're just doing, generally speaking, some form of camera support from a monopod to a shoulder rig to a Steadicam rig, or tripods for interviews. Sound mixer usually does nothing but sound, because they're miking up a ton of people. Interviews, often the boom mic is on a stand, so they can do sound mixing. And then the rest of the time it's unscripted, right? So they do not know what's going to be said. So you have lavs on everyone. Now, if you're doing interview only, like say, CBN is sending a crew to go do an interview, frequently sound is just run straight to camera, and the camera person or people have to also run sound. It happens a lot, guys. This just is the world we live in. So a small crew might only be 2 or 3 people to go do interviews. For actors, the production manager or line producer really doesn't have a lot to do with actors other than finalizing paperwork. If there is a casting director, they give their first choices to the director and the producer. The producer negotiates, then the production manager really just completes the paperwork. SAG, there's the reports to do in the production office, but in terms of hiring and getting actors on board, it's primarily a casting director or the producer and director who are dealing with that. So a couple last cast and crew considerations to not forget. These are people. They are people with personality conflicts and dietary restrictions and history and friendships and feuds and all of those things. They're people, and you're putting them together for likely 12 hours a day for weeks on end with minimal breaks. Some of them may be sharing rooms. You've got to think about feeding them and housing them. Possibly not housing if it's a local shoot, but you've got to feed them during shoot times. Crafty in meals, it adds up, and you may have some crazy configurations of dietary restrictions. The whole thing is high stress and high pressure. When you look at the size of those crew lists, even on a large set, everyone has a job. So you have a high pressure to fulfill your job. There's not a lot of redundancy of, somebody's going to fill in for me. It's okay if I flake. That's not the way it works. These are compartmentalized positions that everyone has their job. So you want to, in whatever producer capacity you're in, try to minimize this with first who you hire, and then setting up the situation so that pressure is mitigated. It's not going to go away, but help people to not be falling apart from stress. I've been on shoots before where people are like falling over from heat stroke because they don't want to slow down and let anyone down when they needed to stop and drink some water and get in the shade. They needed a stronger hand telling them, you need to stop. And on one shoot, there needed to be more PAs who were just doing nothing but forcing water on people and bringing them umbrellas for shade. That was something that wasn't thought through right. But what are those ways you can minimize it? Also think about your NDAs, your non-disclosure agreements with cast and crew, if they need to be signed and what those are. And social media, let people know, is this a shoot where we want you to talk about it? We want you to build it up. Or is it a secretive shoot where, we're going to get in trouble if anything gets released? It will all go through the unit publicist. You just need to think about it, put it in the contracts, and discuss it with them. All right. So those are a few more considerations there.